The arena reeked of scorched ozone, fermented bloodweed, and the sour tang of overexcited Thranthian musk glands. These were the smells of war. Or rather, the smells of a quarterly rating spike dressed as war, beamed live to 86 systems, 12 minor moons, and a casino asteroid where the feed had a 5-minute delay and twice the volume. The SH Krendak's Eternal War Dome hovered above a volcanic rift on planet Glome, a planet whose main exports were ritual combat and smug superiority. Camera drones zigzagged through the air like caffeinated insects, their lenses snapping images of toothy spectators and overpriced merchandise. Alien fans bellowed, shrieked, whistled through neck vents and slapped pseudopods together in a rhythm that somehow offended every known concept of music. The pre-show entertainment featured an acrobatic duel between 2 sapient slime molds and an interpretive dance performed by a 5-breasted warbard from the Millikan cluster, whose entire performance was later banned in polite systems. The event was, officially, titled the Intergalactic Combative Performance Symposium. Unofficially, everyone just called it the Fights. Galactic diplomacy in a more honest form. Single combat trials to settle disputes, affirm cultural relevance, or just put bums in anti-grav seats. Each match was a calculated show of strength, ritualized aggression, and whatever counted as honor among beings who consumed light and excreted prophecy. Tonight's match carried extra weight. The Alvani Warmasters, the galaxy's largest coalition of belligerent protein towers, had challenged a rising upstart species to ceremonial combat. A tiny, pink-skinned race with no exoskeletons, minimal redundant organs, and a tragically romantic fascination with irony. Humans. When the announcement came, the audience laughed. Not metaphorically. Not in a polite, diplomatic chuckle, but a full-throated multi-species cacophony. A warbling cackle from the gelatinous seats. High-pitched beeping from the synthetics. Even the Jatel, who technically lacked vocal cords, found ways to mock. A hologram above the arena displayed the contestant species with a dramatic shimmer. One side showed General Vrothkthar, an Alvani warrior with shoulders broader than small aircraft. The other side flashed to static, then resolved into the unimpressive form of a human female wearing what looked like fabric. A clamshell-fanged Brachyton slurped a vat of nutrient sludge and barked, "Is that one of their children?" "No," replied a nearby Kthic diplomat, clicking through his translator. "I believe that is their warrior." More laughter. One creature fell off its gravity perch. At the edge of the arena, the announcer floated down from the sky like a gift nobody wanted. The MC, a spherical, glistening gastropod with gold-plated eye stalks and a booming voice processed through a Baroque amplifier, began the ritual welcome. Gentle beings of the known galaxy. Participants of the devouring accord. Freelancers of mayhem. Welcome to the 7th cycle grand bout. Cheers. Explosions. An interpretive flame burst from a nearby tower. The MC twirled dramatically. Tonight, a battle of civilizations. A crucible of legacy. The Alvani Warmasters have placed their honor, their banners, and 3 marginally inhabited moons on the line. A roar from the Alvani section, where warriors pounded their chests and screamed declarations of ancestral vengeance. And their challenger. The MC paused, an unsettling gurgle passing through its gelatin. The humans of Earth. Representatives of the Terran Confederacy. Occupants of, well, a rather quaint planet. Silence. Then one long, low sigh of disbelief. The camera feed panned to the Terran ambassador, a middle-aged bureaucrat in a poorly fitted suit sipping a fizzy drink and adjusting his tie. He gave a shaky thumbs up. And now, the champion of the Alvani, General Vrothkthar. Trumpets that sounded suspiciously like whale mating calls blared through the arena. Vroth stepped forward from a mist of electrified fog, each footstep cracking the plated floor beneath him. He was armor incarnate, muscles like tectonic plates stacked under a hide of iridescent scale. His weapon, an electroflail the size of a speeder bike, dragged sparks with every motion. He turned slowly, letting his bulk radiate significance. Then he slammed a fist to his chest and boomed in Alvanic. "I Kthar, blood of the 9th rending, crusher of moons, consumer of unrepentant flame. I do battle not to win, but to educate." The audience went wild. Fireworks. Confetti spores. One spectator exploded out of sheer enthusiasm. And now, said the MC, suddenly sounding unconvinced, their opponent, representing humanity, Mira Ellison. No fanfare. No special effects. Just a figure stepping quietly into the arena. She wore a suit of flexible, non-reflective mesh, gray-blue, almost featureless save for an irregular shifting shimmer like heat on stone. No armor. No weapons visible. Her short brown hair was tied back in a utilitarian twist, and her eyes scanned the space with cool disinterest. The noise didn't die down so much as falter, confused. A few species tried to interpret her stillness as some kind of psychological warfare. Others just assumed a wardrobe malfunction. "Is that a fashion statement?" muttered a Joluvian news blob. "She doesn't even glow," hissed a Thranthian matriarch. Ellie didn't respond. She was calculating. Wind speed. Sand texture. Vrotha's foot positioning. The pressure of gravity here was slightly off, denser air, slight pull to the southeast quadrant. Her HUD flickered dimly over one eye, data flowing in low-light hues. Her neural node ticked once against her temple. Vroth sneered. "They send a civilian?" Ellie blinked. Once. The MC recovered. "Let the ritual begin." A gong sounded, 2 tones too flat. Vroth stepped forward to perform the Ulvani rite of dominance. He slammed a stone medallion into the sand, shouted a string of ancestral names, and bit his own shoulder for dramatic bloodletting. Ellie stood still. "She refuses the pre-battle display," cried the MC, aghast. "No, she just doesn't care," murmured a spectator in diplomatic robes. Beneath the arena, betting algorithms spun into chaos. Odds changed by the second. Vroth was a 0.01 to 1 favorite. Ellie's odds stretched like a joke. Bookies offered free drinks just for pretending to wager on her. The Martian bookie on Orbital 9 offered lifetime insurance if she so much as landed a hit. And yet, some noticed, there were no tremors in her stance. No adrenaline spikes. No fear. She simply waited. Vroth stomped toward her, every step a threat, his flail beginning to crackle with ionic plasma. He spun it in lazy arcs, letting it sizzle against the arena floor. "Any final words, little pink?" he growled. Ellie tilted her head. "You talk too much." Laughter erupted. From the human section, at least. The MC gurgled again. "Warriors, take your marks." A ripple of energy passed across the arena as the combat ward activated, a shimmering dome of lethal permissibility. Within it, death was sanctioned, applauded, encouraged. Vroth planted his feet. Muscles bulged. Saliva hit the ground and vaporized. Ellie exhaled once, a slow breath that aligned with the flickering shimmer of her suit. Her body fuzzed at the edges. Heat mirage? Optical tech? Neural phase distortion? The audience couldn't tell. "Begin." And Vroth charged. The arena shook. Sand blasted outward. The first swipe of his flail cleaved a trench into the ground deep enough to bury a family shuttle. But Ellie was gone. Not in the sense of stepped aside or dodged. Gone. The crowd blinked. Vroth turned. Nothing. The sensors registered her heat signature in 12 different places, none of which made spatial sense. The Ulvani roared. "Coward! Face me." Above, the MC attempted commentary. "It appears the human has initiated, tactical repositioning." A polite way of saying, she vanished and nobody knew how. This wasn't invisibility. This was subtraction. Even the announcers couldn't find her. Vroth rampaged, swinging at shadows, demolishing columns, hurling fragments into the crowd. The dome flickered as bits of rock and rage slammed into the barrier. And still, nothing. Just heat. Just silence. And a sound. Not loud. Not dramatic. A click. The kind of sound a safety makes when disengaged. Vroth turned toward it. And Ellie stepped forward, visible now, standing on a fragment of shattered column 3 meters above the arena floor. Her eyes locked on his. No weapons drawn. Just her. Unafraid. A beat of silence. Then the feed cut. For exactly 4 seconds. A galaxy gasped. When it returned, Vroth was still standing. Still breathing. But unmoving. The flail dropped. His eyes, those massive indigo eyes, rolled upward. And then he fell. Not in slow motion. Not cinematically. He simply crumpled, like a building with no foundation. Dust rose. And Ellie, expression unreadable, stepped down from her perch. The crowd didn't cheer. Not yet. They didn't know what to do. The MC gurgled once, failed to find words, and let the silence hang. Ellie walked to the edge of the dome. The ward shimmered, then parted. She stepped through, unhurried. No applause. Just a growing awareness. Something had changed. And nobody saw it coming. Because they never saw her at all. Aboard the Gloam Orbital Ring Station, Room 114B of the Diplomatic Holding Suite was quiet, too quiet for the political chaos it had just triggered. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for monasteries, or places where someone had just discovered a live grenade in their cereal. Ellie sat cross-legged on the faux organic recliner that tried too hard to simulate Terran leather. Her hands rested lightly on her knees, fingers twitching in the aftermath of controlled adrenaline. She didn't meditate, exactly. She didn't believe in anything as indulgent as inner peace. She recalibrated, muscle tension, oxygen saturation, neural latency. The neural node in her skull pinged an update to her wrist pad. No injuries, elevated cortisol, situational awareness. Perfect. Congratulations, said Ambassador Yulman, stepping in with the nervous energy of a man walking into a bear trap he himself had baited. You've just made half the known galaxy reconsider invading Earth. And the other half start planning it anyway. Ellie didn't look up. You wanted spectacle. I delivered. Yulman looked like he regretted both the request and his career path. He pinched the bridge of his nose. You obliterated an Ulvani war icon in one move. Do you know what kind of diplomatic precedent that sets? She did. She just didn't care. Wasn't one move, Ellie said finally. It took 15. Yulman blinked. 15. Micro-movements. Pressure shifts. Light angle adjustment. Neural node anticipation. She looked at him now, her expression unreadable. It just looked like one. Across the station, in a reinforced medbay carved from neutronium alloy and blessed by 6 religious orders, General Vrothkthar lay unconscious. Not in a coma. His species had 3 layers of consciousness, but in a state the Ulvani called Kashtora, which loosely translated to the sleep of public shame. No visible wounds. No broken bones. Just neural feedback collapse. His entourage milled about like hornets with tactical degrees. Strategists whispered. Medic priests laid out sigils and stimulant probes. The Ulvani were not used to losing, and certainly not to losing without knowing how. Standing at the foot of the general's bed was someone even larger. Hulking, green-black, spiked in places nature had no business designing. Supreme Commander Grothmel of the Ulvani Legate stared at his fallen champion like he might spontaneously resuscitate through sheer disappointment. I do not understand, Groth growled. A junior lieutenant attempted an explanation. She used a cloaking technique, sir. Some kind of, disruptive motion camouflage. Groth turned his head, very slowly. Are you suggesting, he said, with the eerie calm of impending slaughter, that we were defeated by a trick of light? The lieutenant took a step back. Well, yes. But very advanced light. Tactical light. Theoretical in most. Groth's eyes narrowed until they resembled hostile punctuation. Dismissed. The lieutenant vanished in a blur of self-preservation. Back in room 114B, Ellie sipped nutrient paste through a straw. It was labeled chocolate, which was galactic code for brown and emotionally disappointing. You know they'll come for you, Yulman said, pacing now. Not just the Ulvani. Everyone. You made them look vulnerable. I made them look slow, Ellie corrected. Because they are. Yulman paused. "You're enjoying this?" "No. I just expected it." And she had. From the moment they selected her, an unknown operator from Earth's Special Recon Division, buried in redacted files and casual disinterest, she had known what they wanted. A token. A sacrificial performance to give humanity a charming loss on a big stage. Instead, she'd given them fear. The Ulvani were the perfect foil. They were a species bred for theater. Every gesture was twice rehearsed, every battle filmed from 3 angles. Their victories were operatic, their defeats so rare they became religious lessons. To defeat them, publicly, silently, that was more than victory. That was heresy. Which suited Ellie fine. Later that night, the Intergalactic Commentary Tribunal assembled in emergency session. 5 representatives, all wearing different degrees of feathers and regret, convened over the official footage. "Pause it there," said the CH-Mall archivist, eyes swiveling independently. Right before she steps forward. The frame froze. Ellie's face looked almost bored. "She doesn't use a weapon," said the aquatic delegate. "She doesn't strike." And yet, the neural readings show, look at this, she triggers a cascade through his limbic folds before contact. "It's not a weapon," muttered the insectoid analyst. "It's intention. Calculated, precise intention." "She shamed him," the reptilian delegate said, awed. "On a molecular level." Word spread. First through military channels. Then into the undercurrents of black market betting pools. Then to the diplomatic corps, and eventually, inevitably, into the teeth of the galactic political machine. The humans had a ghost. A soldier that didn't fight, didn't bleed, didn't show up on scanners. And she was quiet. That was the worst part. The galaxy could handle cruelty, arrogance, even madness. But not poise. Not subtlety. The betting lines reopened with a vengeance. Everyone wanted a rematch. Everyone wanted her data. But no one wanted to fight her. Not directly. Except one. His name was Threxenbull of the Sixfold Arena, a champion bred in the helium trenches of Melgar Prime, twice-crowned tyrant of the Voxian Crucibles. He was 6 meters tall, part synthetic, part predator, and 100% ratings gold. His victories were measured in body count. His PR team had already issued a statement before he'd been cleared by the Combat Commission. The Melgar Prime Collective formally challenges the human operative Mira Ellison to a sanctioned bout to restore honor, integrity, and viewer engagement. He even had a signature move, the Convergence, a spiraling triple-limb takedown that had once vaporized an opponent's memories mid-fight. He was brutal, charismatic, and widely believed to be physically incapable of blinking. Ellie received the news in a transit pod bound for the atmospheric upper dome. She read the challenge once, closed the datapad, and said nothing. Yulman flailed. "You can't accept that. It's not even part of the tournament structure. It's a grudge match. Do you know what they'll do if you lose?" "I won't." "You're not invincible." "I'm not interested in being invincible," Ellie replied, watching the light smear across Gloam's 3 suns. "I'm interested in being unreadable." "But Threxen, he's made of plasma tendons. He was forged in a gravity well." Ellie turned her head slightly. "Then he'll fall harder." The next 48 hours were pure escalation. Threxen's promotional team released an action reel spliced with dramatic synth music and voiceovers from planets that no longer existed. He posed with the weapons of fallen enemies. He made bold statements about vengeance, retribution, and proper martial aesthetics. Ellie didn't comment. Her side released nothing. No profile. No backstory. No photos. A reporter tried to interview her in the corridor. She stepped into a shadow and never came out. Threxen trained publicly. Through tanks. Lifted buildings. Shattered titanium boulders with his teeth. Ellie calibrated micro-thresholds on her reflex dampeners. The fight was set for 3 days after the initial challenge. The arena was moved to Gloam's upper spire, a zero-gravity, sphere-based chamber designed to simulate high-velocity combat in variable physics. It was a stage built for spectacle, and Threxen had already choreographed his entrance. 3 separate planets declared holidays. The MC, now heavily medicated, prepared his script. "Do you want me to write anything for the pre-fight dossier?" asked Yeoman, pacing beside her one last time. "A statement, a line of personal philosophy, some kind of tactical insight?" Ellie looked up from her suit diagnostics. She thought for a moment. Then, "Let them assume I'm the least dangerous thing in the room." That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. As the final preparations began, Threxen delivered a live interview standing atop a molten cliff, haloed in heat and fury. "She will know fear," he declared to a cheering crowd. "She will taste my wrath. She will see my glory." Ellie was already in the arena, unnoticed by half the security drones. Positioned. Quiet. Phil. When the announcement finally came over the intercom, combatant Mira Ellison confirmed for entry. It caused a momentary stir. She hadn't even been seen entering. The betting lines surged again. Rumors of teleportation, stealth cloning, subspace phasing. No one agreed how she moved, only that she did. The MC took center dome, spinning now with less confidence and more caution. "Ladies, gentle beings, energy forms of ambiguous density. We present a battle for the ages. A confrontation of force and finesse. The beast of Melgar Prime versus the ghost of Terra." Threxen roared from his launch pod, electricity crackling along his armor. Ellie waited in silence, pressed against the curve of the chamber like a shadow made flesh. The lights dimmed. The crowd shrieked. The duel was seconds away. And for the first time in recorded memory, Threxen blinked. There was no countdown. No trumpet. No ceremonial scream from a fire-breather dressed like a solar storm. There was only breath. A collective inhale from the crowd encased in the Gloamspire's triple-shell arena. A soundless, tense vacuum shared by billions of eyes watching across 3 time zones and 6 dimensions. Even the MC, a creature who had never once known the sensation of silence, paused mid-cue. And then Threxen moved. It wasn't a charge. It was an inevitability. An explosive mass of engineered fury and polished choreography. He leapt from his launch pedestal with a momentum that cracked the interior glass of spectator drones. His silhouette twisted midair, limbs rotating with terrifying precision. Every muscle was a weapon, every motion a signature strike from some grim archive of doom. The move was known, celebrated, feared, the convergence. 3 strikes in 3 vectors. 1 to disable, 1 to disorient, 1 to dominate. Spinning claws lashed toward Ellie like they were trying to erase her molecular alignment. And she wasn't there. At least, not in any way Threxen could track. She hadn't dodged. Not in the conventional sense. She'd repositioned, without thrust, without noise. A millimeter here, a fractional lean there. Her boots never touched the arena floor. Her neural sync had already calculated Threxen's line of attack 3 seconds before he committed to it. The first swipe passed through where her clavicle should have been. The second caught only air, though the turbulence rippled through the chamber's atmosphere like a sonic boom of frustration. The third. She made contact. Not with his body. With the light. A subtle press of her thumb against the side of her left thigh, barely noticeable, activated the second layer of her suit's neuroreactive membrane. Colors shifted. Shadows reconfigured. The arena's artificial sun bent slightly, as if reconsidering its position. And to the cameras, to the crowd, to Threxen's predator-grade sensory input, Ellie vanished. She didn't cloak. She didn't go transparent. She exploited a known flaw in ultravisual contrast adaptation. She became statistically unnoticeable. The audience roared, but it was the wrong kind of roar. Not the exaltation of violence. The confusion of awe. They didn't understand what they were watching, which was precisely the point. Threxen halted mid-air, eyes scanning in every direction. His sensors pinged negative returns. His nostrils flared. His jaw widened. "Show yourself," he bellowed, voice amplified through his internal biohorn. Ellie didn't answer. Because she was already above him, tucked into the thermal blind spot of the dome's curvature, body still, breath steady, pupils tracking micro-movements in his spinal flexion. That twitch. That hesitation. That was where it would start. She dropped like a falling algorithm. No flourish. No declaration. Just surgical velocity. Mid-descent, she tilted her hips 3 degrees to adjust for the vector distortion bubble Threxen emitted in frustration. She slipped under its field and tapped his armored left shoulder. Gently. It was enough. The suit, Melgar issue, reinforced with quantum braid, interpreted the tap as harmless. But Ellie's tap wasn't about force. It was about data. Her glove pulsed, took readings, sent them to her neural node. Joint latency, 0.9 milliseconds. Reactive torque threshold, 4.3 knots. Armor seam resilience, 92%. Except there. Right clavicle joint. Slightly overcompensated for rotation damping. No adaptive sync. Just brute stabilization. She'd found her angle. Threxen spun again, flailing now, slicing the air with strikes faster than bullets and just as deadly. One clipped her arm, not her real arm, but the ghost projection trailing half a meter behind. It dissolved like dust. She circled. Quiet as a nightmare. This was not a fight. This was mathematics played out in real time across a 3-dimensional murder field. Threxen roared and lunged again. Ellie pivoted, changed her breathing cycle, rebalanced her weight toward her right heel. She vanished for 0.7 seconds, reappeared at Threxen's rear quadrant, and fired a short pulse of hyperdirectional white noise, just enough to confuse his inner ear. He staggered. It was enough. She shot forward, kicked off a low-grav wall, and collided with his back, but again, not to attack. Just to push. To redirect. The beast's own mass did the rest. He overcorrected, tried to spin, but the altered momentum took him into the side of the dome. Hard. A ripple of kinetic force vibrated through the chamber. Threxen's claws scraped along the wall, showering sparks. She followed, keeping pressure. Subtle, gliding. Like gravity reconfigured just to annoy him. He flailed again. Caught a glimpse of her elbow. Just enough. He pivoted, too fast, and swung with a kind of reckless abandon reserved for cornered beasts and ex-boyfriends. His hand passed through her. Another projection. He stumbled, confused, and that's when she whispered. Not loud. Not taunting. Just enough to trace along the inside of his skull. Too slow. He spun, but she was below him, already rising, already loading. Not a gun. Not a blade. Something infinitely simpler. A pellet, the size of a grain of sand, stored in her right glove. Magnetic, biodegradable, non-lethal by regulatory standards. But laced with something very specific, a resonant disruptor keyed to Threxen's neuroresponse chain. She loaded it into the launcher built into the first joint of her index finger. A twitch. A whisper of movement. Then stillness. 1 second passed. The arena quieted again. The crowd sensed something, though they didn't know what. Ellie aimed not at Threxen's body, but at the narrow gap between his roar and his breath, the moment where exertion met vulnerability. She fired. There was no sound. No light. But Threxen froze. His limbs locked. His eyes widened. A convulsion rippled through his frame. Then a tremor. He dropped to one knee. And the silence deepened. Not unconscious. Not injured. Just halted. His body refused him. His will shrieked. Ellie landed in front of him, barely touching the ground. Her face was calm. Her breath steady. Threxen's gaze twitched upward, confusion and fury wrestling for dominance. What did you do? Ellie tilted her head. I gave you a moment, she said, to realize it was over. And then she tapped her finger once more, deactivating the resonant node. Threxen collapsed, not violently, just completely. A titan, undone by a whisper. The arena didn't cheer. Not at first. It was too stunned. The audience's sense of narrative had been shattered. This wasn't a climax. It was an erasure. It took a full 10 seconds before the first scream of astonishment cut through the silence. Then the others joined. Ellie stepped back, not triumphant, precise. She didn't bow, didn't pose. She simply turned toward the exit ramp, leaving Threxen twitching in the afterglow of tactical humiliation. Behind her, the MC fumbled the microphone sphere. Ladies and, yes, that was, indeed, an unexpected result. A recalibration of expectations. The audience erupted. So did the intergalactic media. The moment was rebroadcast in every format known to sentient life. Slow motion, thermal, neural, emotional playback. Even Threxen's own feed was analyzed frame by frame. There were petitions, protests, new doctrines. One channel called it the invisible shot. Another called it the elegance of destruction. The Ulvani called it blasphemy. Earth's diplomatic delegation submitted a new amendment to the Galactic Combat Fairness Accords. It included a clause about non-visual engagement strategy rights. It passed. Ellie watched the aftermath from a private viewing port in the orbital dark zone. Yulman appeared beside her. For once, he didn't speak right away. He just sighed. "You've started something." "I always do." He glanced at her. "What happens now?" She sipped from a silver packet marked vanilla. It still tasted like compressed grief. "They'll escalate. Bigger champions. Unpredictable tech. Psychological warfare. And you." Ellie's eyes didn't leave the stars. "I'll adapt." "You always do." Below them, Threxen was wheeled into recovery. Conscious, furious, quietly weeping. And somewhere across the void, 100 militaries updated their training manuals. They called it the Ellison Gambit. She called it breathing properly. The stars watched. Silent. Suspicious. The next challenger was already preparing. The Galactic Council's emergency chamber smelled like ozone, burnt kelp, and expensive panic. That was always the smell when someone had upended the status quo, especially when the perpetrator was a human. Especially when the humans hadn't been taken seriously 5 cycles ago. Holoscreens shimmered in a dissonant rainbow of broadcast footage. Slow-motion breakdowns of Ellie's invisible shot, Threxen's tremor, the precise arc of her fingertip. Commentators argued in 9 languages simultaneously, voice layers overlapping like a fever dream of outrage. On one screen, the Ulvani ambassador was actively combusting in protest, his outer dermis venting steam through 11 pores. Ellie sat in the observation gallery above them, legs crossed, expression flat. If she leaned slightly forward, she could hear every delegation's whispered scrambling. The ANRET, twitching through legal documents like rodents in heat. The Svan, trying to reverse-engineer her movements in simulation pods. The Malvik, suspiciously silent, because silence meant plotting. Yulman stood beside her, arms folded, gazing down with an expression of delighted dismay. "You've effectively caused a galactic diplomatic crisis with one calibrated twitch." Ellie didn't look at him. "Only one. I must be slipping. They're calling for a ban. On you, specifically." She shrugged. "Good. That means they noticed." The council speaker, a being constructed entirely of glass chimes and prejudices, let out a discordant toll that echoed through the chamber. The room hushed, save for the ambient hiss of species requiring artificial humidity. "The matter before us," the speaker announced, "is one of existential uncertainty. A challenge to the definition of combat. The act executed by contestant Ellison Prime of Terra was, by our metrics, unquantifiable. It lacked force, spectacle, or spirit. It may, in fact, have been too subtle to constitute a valid engagement. There was a collective shuffling of appendages, flippers, and tentacles. The Council preferred wars that came with neon fireballs and detachable limbs. Ellie's victory had the audacity to suggest intelligence. A dozen ambassadors lit up simultaneously to object. She cheated. It was sorcery, clearly non-empirical. She whispered him into submission. That's not combat, that's manipulation. Ellie sipped her hydration packet, which now tasted like smugness. If they'd like a rematch, they're welcome to bring someone who can count. The speaker turned a few decibels toward her. Do you have any statement to offer in defense of your tactics? She stood, walking to the edge of the gallery. Every eye in the chamber tracked her. My only tactic was preparation, she said. My only weapon was understanding. You sent Threxen in like a sledgehammer to crush an idea. I simply removed the need to be hit. You embarrassed him, barked the Tarsk warden, his facial ridges trembling. He was your superior. In mass, Ellie said. Not in thought. The chamber hissed again. The Svan ambassador tried to recover some narrative control. You must admit, your strategy undermines the core principle of the arena, observable dominance. Maybe it's time your principles evolved. The silence that followed wasn't stunned, it was sullen. She could see it, the recalibration clicking behind every alien optic, every bureaucrat's crestfallen shrug. They had built their world on the idea that humans were enthusiastic but naive. Charming, yes, but not threatening. That illusion was now broken, and they had no contingency plan for grace. Yulman leaned slightly toward her, voice pitched low. You could milk this, you know. Book tours. Training schools. Sell branded elbow pads. She didn't smile. They wouldn't get it. Then explain it. I didn't win because I was clever. I won because I paid attention. That's the part they'll never sell in a bottle. The council had started arguing with itself now. A full 6 subcommittees were convened mid-session to address different elements of the Ellison anomaly. One argued over redefining weapon thresholds. Another debated sensory ethics. A third began drafting legislation to quantify intention, as if that had ever been measurable in war. Ellie watched, mildly bored. She knew the pattern. Create doubt, watch the powerful flail to codify it. They didn't fear her strike. They feared the idea that war might require subtlety. A small panel light blinked beside her. A private message. Diplomatic channel. Source. Terran Coalition. She tapped it. Her superior's voice came through, Commander Reese, a man whose jawline had once won a planetary vote. Ellison. You've just become the most important piece in the game. Congratulations, soldier. You're now a symbol. Ellie sighed. I was hoping for vacation. No chance. You're to be routed to 3 diplomatic summits, a dozen training collectives, and a think tank in the Daleth system that wants to decode your heuristics. Also, the President would like you to consider a medal. Something subtle. Cloaked, perhaps. I don't want a medal. Too late. You're trending on all 6 quantum channels. They're calling you the ghost of Gloam's Spire. Terrible branding. Still better than Mammal Miracle, which is what the Ulvani tabloids ran with. The call ended. Ellie exhaled. The air tasted of synthetic eucalyptus and distant guilt. Below, the council reached a conclusion. Or rather, a non-conclusion. We defer the formal classification of contestant Ellison's actions, the speaker said, voice pitched into a legal tremolo. Pending further analysis, we classify her victory as anomalous, but valid. The record shall stand. Meaning, the Tarsk warden spat. Meaning, the speaker said slowly, you were outplayed. A wave of tension broke over the room like static through wool. Ellie turned and walked out of the gallery. Not quickly. Not triumphantly. Just quietly. She had no interest in watching them squirm through another 15 paragraphs of diplomatic backpedaling. Yulman followed. Where to now? Breakfast, she said. It's 1900 hours. I didn't say when. They boarded the transport capsule, which whined slightly under the strain of too much historical significance. As it slid away from the council spire, Ellie gazed out the window. The stars were oddly muted today. Like they, too, were uncertain what came next. In the streets below, humans celebrated in pubs, circles, and slightly disorganized raves. There were effigies of Threxen, most made of recycled wrappers. Children mimicked Ellie's stance, though with far more noise. I think I scared them, she murmured. Yulman offered a dry chuckle. You redefined the battlefield. That's more than fear. That's legacy. She glanced at him. Legacy is for dead people. Yes, he said. And politicians. You're halfway to both. They rode in silence for a minute. Then softly, Yulman said, You know what the Ulvani have done, right? Since the match. Filed 7 formal protests. Cancelled their next exhibition. Burned all footage of the fight. And Ellie arched an eyebrow. They've begun training female scouts in camouflage. Quietly. But it's happening. Ellie let that sit. Then, finally, the corner of her mouth turned upward. Good, she said. They arrived at the docking platform. Ships buzzed around in their usual mechanical choreography, but Ellie stood out, a plain, gray utility vessel with no markings. A courier shuttle, disguised as forgettable. Fitting. As she approached, a reporter darted past the guards. Ellison. Ellie. One question. What do you say to those who claim you've made warfare too cerebral? She paused. Turned. I say they should have paid more attention in school. Flashbulbs. Clicks. Shouting. She boarded the ship, door sealing behind her. The vessel lifted, steady and silent, angling back toward orbit. The world receded. The arena, the council, the crowds, all became small again, as they should be. She sat in the pilot's seat, boots up, spine relaxed. There was no need to celebrate. She'd done her job. And now she had work to do. Far off, beyond the edge of the next system, another challenge was forming. Something newer. Something stranger. Ellie didn't care. She was ready. She always would be.